So we will move on now also to the sense of smell and taste and a bit about how they're related. So you stated that we normally say taste when we mean flavor, and that smell synergizes with taste. Can you explain what the chemical senses are and the differences between, particularly the difference between smell and taste? And I thought this was interesting because I started my work in the multisensory world and also in the smell world right around COVID. And I kept hearing people saying, I lost my sense of taste. I lost my sense of taste. And I knew that they were partly wrong. So this is why I wanted to ask you this question.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you. So our sense of taste and smell are referred to as the chemical senses because they're both responding to chemicals that are in the environment. In the sense of smell, it's volatile chemicals, that is to say, chemicals that can float through the air. They also have to have a certain size and shape for us to be able to be, picked up by our olfactory receptors that are in our nose. But when we breathe while, we're existing, and we're awake, because you can't actually smell while you're asleep. But when we're breathing, when we're awake, we're bringing in various aroma chemicals into our nose, and they're connecting with the olfactory receptors, and we're detecting them then as lemon and banana and asparagus or whatever the case might be. And that is actually happening through our nostrils. Now, when we're consuming something and something is in our mouth, we're also perceiving chemicals, those specifically that can be dissolved in liquid, which is the saliva in our mouth. And it's through the saliva that then the chemicals that we're tasting get into the taste buds that are in our mouth and so forth. And we have different types of taste buds for detecting different basic tastes. But the basic tastes are actually very simple. So our basic taste system is, from the most sort of purest perspective, just salt, sour, sweet, and bitter. There's a big movement now to also include umami in this camp. So 5 basic tastes. I won't go into, the pros and cons of including that. There's also a little bit of argument for saying there's a fatty taste. So for example, when we consume something with fatty acids, but it's also really a feel. So like the creaminess of ice cream and so forth, as well as possibly even an electric taste. Like if you were to put a battery on your tongue, you'd feel this tingling. But without getting into all that, sort of our basic experience of food really comprises salt, sour, sweet, and bitter. And the reason I find umami difficult is actually most people, when they're tasting umami, think that they're actually tasting salt. So it's very similar to saltiness, but it has a sort of a different depth dimension to it. But in any case, so when you're eating, and I'll keep using this example of banana. So when you're eating a banana, for example, from the point of view of taste, the only thing that you're perceiving is sweetness, and depending upon the ripeness, maybe a little bit of sourness. What makes the banana a banana rather than just some mushy kind of thing that you have in your mouth with a little sweetness and maybe a little sourness is the aroma that's coming from the banana while you're consuming it. And the aroma is being released depending upon what the food is actually, and heating makes a big difference to this. So when you're eating something that's hot and, for example, the steam is coming off the plate as it's being brought to you, you can smell that food before you start to eat it. So you're smelling it through your nostrils. And then as soon as it's in your mouth, what's happening is there's an open airway system between the back of our mouth and our nose. And it's through this open airway system that as we breathe, so when we inhale while food is in our mouth, and that's bringing the aroma chemicals that are from that food up into the back of the mouth, into the nostrils, landing on the same patch of tissue where all our olfactory receptors are, but coming from the back of the mouth. And then the exhalation, so breathing out, sort of whooshes it along. And it's this breathing process that we're doing while we're eating that allows us to also smell at the same exact time as we're tasting. So we have the taste of sugar, slightly sour, with the aroma coming from the banana, and the brain then knits these two perceptions together and produces the experience we call banana while we're eating. And because it's taking place in the mouth, it's like a localization illusion. We think it's coming all from the mouth, but it's really coming from both the mouth and the nose, and fundamentally really just coming from our brain, because our brain is putting those two together. And so what we really are experiencing there is the combined perception of smell and taste, which is flavor. So flavor is the right word to use. And for example, just to give you, a really easy trick to do this, I do this with my students all the time, is take some jelly beans, pluck your nostrils, put the jelly bean in your mouth, chew, and you'll find you just taste sweet. Then you release your nostrils like, oh, it's licorice, it's cherry, it's popcorn, it's whatever it's supposed to be. And that's all coming from the fact that you're now able to breathe. But what's also really interesting is that jelly bean will now taste sweeter because the scent, when it's involved in our experience of food, actually augments our perception of the basic taste. So foods taste sweeter, sourer, more bitter, more salty when we can also smell the French fries or the chocolate or whatever else we're consuming. And that's one of the reasons why when people lose their sense of smell, their sense of taste, first of all, they're saying taste, but they really mean flavor because they can still say this is salty or this is sweet, but that's such a dramatically reduced experience. It feels like they've lost everything, but also their perception of sweetness, their perception of saltiness is in fact less because they can't get the smell that's also coming from the food that they're eating. So there's this direct connection and synergy between smell and taste that creates our perception of food. And when we lose smell, so much of what we experience as pleasure when we're eating is gone. And so people really feel like they've got nothing. And because of this illusion that it seems like it's all coming from the mouth, people say they've lost taste. They really just lost smell, almost always. Sometimes they have lost taste, but that's a lot more rare to have happen.
Yeah, and COVID, having COVID was one of those things that really, really affected people's sense of smell. And so a lot of people lost their sense of smell, and then it of course impacted their sense of taste. But you really realize when you talk to people who that happened to, they're really shocked. And it was really difficult to cope with as well.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, without, this sounds horrible, but the fact that so many people had experience with smell loss and hopefully just in a transient sort of way, as a function of the fact that so many people became infected with COVID, at least, from my perspective, had the positive outcome of making people appreciate and realize how their sense of smell is involved in so many things, not just their experience of food, but their relationships with other people, their relationships with themselves, their general emotional state, their whole feeling of connection with the world around them. And so it's been kind of good that people have had this momentary awareness, but I fear that, people are kind of forgetting already what COVID was really all about, and people who've recovered, they've gone back to their lives and everything is good again. But I have hoped that there is at least some level of appreciation of the sense of smell that will last and be surpassed compared to what people responded to smell beforehand. Although I did a study, I'm not sure if you know about this, but I did a study that I collected data in the spring of 2021. So already COVID had been around for a good year at that point, and many people had smell loss, and many people had, a lot of media awareness of what happened with COVID and how people were so dramatically negatively affected by smell loss and so forth. And I thought, okay, let's find out how people value their sense of smell versus actually vision and hearing, and also in comparison to various common commodities like your cell phone or your hair. Now, so I had physical commodities, I had social commodities, I had some emotional commodities as well. We had 9 different commodities. Anyhow, what we found in this research was, first of all, not surprisingly, people still really, really undervalued their sense of smell compared to vision and hearing. But still really shockingly, we had 2 sets of participants. One were basically the college students, so 20 somethings, and another set were sort of 40 somethings, but we had about 200 in each group. So we had, quite a lot of people. 25% of college students would rather give up their sense of smell than their cell phone. Nearly 50% of all women would rather give up their sense of smell than their hair. Now, I know you and I both, we have long hair. We obviously love hair, but we realize too, this is not like a primary mode through which we experience the world around us. So maybe our past and our passions also make us, probably much more likely. I know myself, I would give up my hair in an instant if I could keep my sense of smell. But it was really surprising to see how easily and still undervalued the sense of smell was. Now, if I would have done this study in 2018, maybe it would have been even worse. So it'll be interesting to see. And also, we've translated this survey into 7 different languages. We've distributed it actually globally now. So over time, collecting data will be very interesting to see. And we've already seen some cultural differences with respect to these responses, because this was originally done just in North America. But it'll be interesting to see how the sort of perception of smell maybe becomes somewhat elevated over time. My fingers are crossed, but hopefully it doesn't decline again. But unfortunately, there was no sort of study that was done in 2018 or 2015 to kind of see, like, maybe this is actually better than it used to be.